There comes a moment in some people's lives when they begin to notice something unsettling, not in the world, but in themselves. At first, it's difficult to explain. You walk into a room and immediately feel a tension nobody mentions. You listen to someone's words and somehow hear what they're not saying. You look into a person's eyes and sense a sadness hidden beneath the smile. And the strange part is, most people seem completely unaware of it. They continue the conversation. They laugh. They move on, as if nothing happened. But you can't. Because once you've seen it, you cannot unsee it. And perhaps you've spent years wondering why. Why do certain situations affect you so deeply? Why do you notice patterns others ignore? Why do you often feel exhausted after spending time around people? Why have you always felt slightly out of place, even among those who love you? If this sounds familiar, Carl Jung believed you may be experiencing something far more significant than simple sensitivity. You may be encountering one of the most misunderstood psychological experiences of all, the burden of awareness. Because contrary to what many people believe, seeing more is not always a gift. Sometimes it feels like a curse, a silent burden carried by those who perceive beneath the surface, those who notice contradictions, those who sense emotional realities that remain invisible to everyone else. And while the world often celebrates intelligence, it rarely talks about the cost of perception, the loneliness, the confusion, the self-doubt, the feeling that you somehow live in a different reality than everyone around you. Jung spent much of his life exploring this mystery. He noticed that some people seemed naturally drawn toward what was hidden, toward the unconscious, toward the symbolic layers of life that most people never stop to notice. And what he discovered was both fascinating and unsettling, because the ability to see what others don't can either lead to wisdom or suffering. It can awaken you or isolate you. It can become the beginning of your transformation or the source of your deepest pain. The difference depends on one thing: whether you understand what is happening. Because if you don't, you may spend years fighting a battle you were never meant to fight. Years trying to fit into places you've already outgrown. Years doubting perceptions that were trying to guide you. Years carrying emotional burdens that never belonged to you. And perhaps that is exactly where you are today. So in this video, we're going to explore Carl Jung's uncomfortable warning about awareness. Why some people see more than others. Why that gift often creates loneliness. Why truth can become dangerous. And how you can learn to live with deep perception without losing yourself in the process. Because what Jung discovered may explain something you've been feeling your entire life. And once you understand it, you may never see yourself the same way again. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt like you noticed things that other people completely missed? Because your answer might reveal more than you think. Most people assume that awareness brings clarity, and it does. But what they rarely discuss is the weight that comes with it. Imagine carrying a radio that never turns off, a radio constantly receiving signals, emotions, patterns, contradictions, hidden tensions, unspoken fears. While everyone else hears silence, you hear noise, not external noise, psychological noise. The subtle signals people unknowingly broadcast every day, the sadness behind confidence, the resentment behind kindness, the fear hidden inside control, the loneliness hidden behind success. For many highly perceptive individuals, life begins to feel like this, a constant stream of information. And at first, they don't even realize it. They simply grow up feeling different. Different from their friends, different from their family, different from the world around them. Not superior, not special, just different. They often become the listeners, the observers, the ones who notice, the ones people confide in, the ones who somehow understand what others are feeling before a single word is spoken. And because this ability comes naturally, they assume everyone experiences life the same way, until one day they realize they don't. They realize most people move through life without noticing what they notice. Most people don't spend hours analyzing conversations. Most people don't feel emotional tension sitting quietly beneath polite interactions. Most people don't carry the emotional atmosphere of an entire room on their shoulders. And suddenly, what once felt normal begins to feel isolating, because awareness creates a unique challenge. The more deeply you perceive reality, the harder it becomes to participate in illusion. Think about that for a moment. The more clearly you see, the less comfortable certain things become. You begin noticing dishonesty. You begin recognizing manipulation. You begin seeing patterns of self-deception, not only in others, but in yourself. And this is where the burden truly begins, because seeing reality clearly sounds appealing, until reality starts asking you to change. For many people, the feeling begins long before they have words for it, long before they discover psychology, long before they hear the name Carl Jung, long before they begin asking deeper questions about themselves. It often begins in childhood. A child sits quietly in a room full of adults. Everyone assumes the child is distracted, but the child is watching, listening, feeling, observing things that nobody realizes are being observed. The tension between parents, the sadness behind a smile, the frustration hidden beneath polite words, the emotional atmosphere of the entire environment. Children who are naturally perceptive often become emotional detectives, not because they choose to, but because their survival depends on it. They learn to read rooms. They learn to sense moods. They learn to predict reactions. And over time, this ability becomes automatic. So automatic that they no longer notice they're doing it. Years pass. The child becomes an adult. But the pattern remains. They continue scanning environments. They continue noticing subtle shifts. They continue feeling what others overlook. And while this can create extraordinary insight, it can also create extraordinary exhaustion, because the mind was never designed to remain hypervigilant forever. Yet many highly perceptive people spend decades in this state, always aware, always observing, always sensing, always processing. The result is a strange contradiction. They understand other people very well, but often struggle to understand themselves. Think about that. How many people spend years studying everyone else's emotions while ignoring their own? How many people become experts at understanding others, yet remain strangers to themselves? Jung believed this happens because awareness can become outwardly focused. You become so fascinated by the world around you that you forget to explore the world within. And eventually, something begins to feel missing. Life becomes successful on the outside, yet empty on the inside. Relationships continue, careers progress, responsibilities are fulfilled, but a quiet question starts appearing in the background. A question many people try desperately to avoid. Who am I beneath all of this? Not who others expect you to be, not who you've learned to become, not who you've performed as, but who you actually are. For some people, this question arrives suddenly, after a breakup, after a loss, after burnout, after a spiritual awakening. For others, it arrives slowly, like a whisper growing louder each year, until it can no longer be ignored. And perhaps the reason this question becomes so powerful is because awareness eventually reveals something uncomfortable. Many people are not living as themselves. They are living as versions of themselves, versions designed to fit in, versions designed to be accepted, versions designed to avoid rejection. Jung called this psychological structure the persona, and understanding it may explain why you felt different for so long, because the persona is the mask we create to survive society. The version of ourselves that knows how to behave, how to fit in, how to belong, how to avoid conflict, how to receive approval. At first, this mask serves a useful purpose. It helps us function. It helps us adapt. It helps us navigate the world. But problems begin when the mask becomes the identity, when we forget where the persona ends and the authentic self begins. This is one of Jung's most important insights, because many highly perceptive people spend years sensing this disconnect. They feel it in themselves, they feel it in others. They notice people performing happiness, performing confidence, performing success, performing certainty. And something inside them recognizes the gap between appearance and reality, the gap between image and truth, the gap between who someone is and who they pretend to be. The more clearly you see this gap, the harder it becomes to ignore. And eventually, you start noticing masks everywhere, in relationships, in workplaces, in social circles, even within yourself. And once that happens, life begins to change, because seeing through masks inevitably leads to another discovery. A discovery Jung believed was one of the most important in human psychology. The realization that behind every mask, there is a shadow. And the shadow always wants to be seen. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Most people hear that quote. Few people truly understand it, because the unconscious is not some distant place hidden deep within the mind. It is active, right now, influencing thoughts, influencing emotions, influencing decisions, influencing relationships. Whether we realize it or not, the unconscious reveals itself constantly, through fears, through dreams, through emotional reactions, through attraction, through judgment. And perhaps nowhere is it more visible than in the shadow. The shadow is everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves, the anger we deny, the insecurity we hide, the envy we suppress, the fear we avoid, the desires we reject, the parts of ourselves we learned were unacceptable. Imagine a person who has spent their entire life trying to appear kind. They never express anger, never raise their voice, never confront anyone. Everyone sees them as peaceful. But beneath that image, a tremendous amount of unexpressed anger accumulates. The shadow holds it, stores it, protects it, and eventually, it finds a way out, not directly, indirectly, through criticism, passive aggression, resentment, sarcasm, projection. This is how the shadow operates, and highly perceptive people often notice these patterns long before others do. They sense when someone's words and emotions don't match. They feel the tension between appearance and reality. They recognize contradictions. And this can be deeply unsettling, because the world begins looking very different once you understand projection. You begin realizing that many people's strongest reactions reveal more about themselves than about the situation they're reacting to. The person obsessed with control may secretly fear chaos. The person obsessed with success may secretly fear inadequacy. The person obsessed with judging others may secretly be judging themselves. Suddenly, human behavior starts making sense, not because people become predictable, but because unconscious patterns become visible, and the more visible they become, the harder it becomes to ignore them. This is where many perceptive individuals encounter a dangerous temptation. They begin focusing entirely on the unconscious of others. They analyze everyone, observe everyone, understand everyone, except themselves. And Jung warned repeatedly against this mistake, because the purpose of awareness is not to expose the shadows of others. The purpose is to illuminate your own. The moment awareness becomes judgment, growth stops. The moment awareness becomes superiority, wisdom disappears. The truly conscious person understands something essential. Every human being has a shadow. Every human being carries unconscious material. Every human being is still learning, including you, including me, including the people we admire most. And this realization changes everything, because awareness becomes less about exposing truth and more about embodying it, less about seeing flaws, and more about becoming whole. But this journey toward wholeness comes with a price that many people never expect, because the more truth you see, the more alone you may begin to feel. And that is where Jung's warning becomes even more profound. There is something that happens when a person begins to see beyond appearances. At first, it feels liberating. You stop being fooled by surface-level impressions. You begin recognizing hidden motivations. You notice emotional patterns. You understand why people behave the way they do. And for a moment, it feels like clarity. But then something unexpected happens. You begin feeling alone, not because people disappear, but because the way you relate to them begins to change. Imagine spending your entire life believing that everyone values honesty. Then one day, you realize that many people value comfort more than truth. Imagine believing that every relationship is built on authenticity. Then discovering that many relationships are built on unspoken agreements. Agreements to avoid difficult conversations. Agreements to protect certain illusions. Agreements to never look too deeply. The moment you see this, something shifts inside you. You begin noticing how often people wear masks. Not because they are dishonest, but because they are afraid. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of judgment. Afraid of vulnerability. Afraid of being truly seen. And perhaps the most painful realization of all is that many people do not want to see themselves. Think about that. Most people say they want truth. Most people say they want growth. Most people say they want authenticity. But when truth begins threatening the identity they have built, resistance appears. Because truth is not always comforting. Truth asks us to change. Truth asks us to let go. Truth asks us to confront parts of ourselves we would rather avoid. And that is why awareness can become lonely. Not because you are isolated from others, but because you are no longer participating in the same illusions. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He knew that consciousness often creates a period of separation, a period where the old way of relating no longer works, yet the new way has not fully emerged. It feels like standing between two worlds. One foot in the familiar, one foot in the unknown. And this in-between space can be incredibly uncomfortable because human beings crave belonging. We want connection. We want understanding. We want community. Yet growth often requires walking through seasons where those things feel distant. Many people interpret this as failure. They assume something has gone wrong. They believe they are becoming disconnected from life. But Jung saw it differently. He saw it as a natural stage of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. Because becoming yourself inevitably means outgrowing certain identities, certain environments, certain relationships, certain ways of thinking. And every time you outgrow something, there is a period of grief, a period of uncertainty, a period of loneliness. Not because growth is wrong, but because transformation always involves loss. You lose old beliefs, old roles, old attachments, old versions of yourself. And for a while, you may feel like you no longer know where you belong. This is why so many spiritually aware people describe feeling disconnected from the crowd. They are not rejecting humanity. They are simply no longer able to pretend, no longer able to force themselves into places that no longer fit, no longer willing to betray themselves for acceptance. And that decision comes with consequences. Because the world often rewards conformity. It rewards people who follow expectations, who repeat familiar patterns, who maintain comfortable narratives. The moment you begin questioning those narratives, you become different, not better, different. And difference often attracts projection. People may misunderstand you. They may criticize choices they don't understand. They may interpret your growth as rejection, your boundaries as arrogance, your independence as distance. Not because those interpretations are true, but because your transformation challenges something within them. Jung believed that unconscious people often react strongly to those who are becoming conscious, because awareness shines light on areas they are still avoiding, and that can be uncomfortable. This is why the journey toward greater awareness requires courage. Not the courage to fight others, the courage to remain true to yourself, even when others don't understand, even when it feels lonely, even when the path becomes uncertain. Because eventually something remarkable begins to happen. The loneliness starts teaching you something. something most people never discover, that solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. And understanding the difference may change your entire life. Most people fear being alone, not because solitude is painful, but because solitude removes distractions. When there is no noise, no constant stimulation, no endless activity, you are left with one thing: yourself. And for many people, that is terrifying. Because solitude acts like a mirror. It reveals what has been ignored, the emotions you've avoided, the questions you've postponed, the truths you've buried beneath busyness. This is why so many people stay constantly occupied, not because they enjoy it, but because stillness forces confrontation. Yet Jung believed solitude was essential for psychological growth, not permanent isolation, not withdrawal from life, but intentional moments of reflection, moments where you stop listening to the world and begin listening to yourself. Because there comes a point in every awakening when external answers stop working. The books help, the videos help, the teachers help. But eventually, the answers must come from within, and that requires silence. Imagine standing beside a lake on a perfectly calm morning. When the water is disturbed, the surface becomes unclear. Reflections disappear. Everything becomes distorted. But when the water becomes still, you can see clearly. The human mind works the same way. A restless mind struggles to perceive truth. A still mind begins to recognize it. This is one reason awareness often feels overwhelming in the beginning. The person sees too much outside themselves, but not enough inside. Their attention remains focused outward, analyzing people, analyzing situations, analyzing the world. Meanwhile, the deeper journey is waiting within. Jung understood that the purpose of consciousness is not observation alone. It is integration, the ability to bring hidden aspects of yourself into awareness, to become whole, to stop running from your own depths. And this process changes your relationship with solitude. At first, solitude feels empty. Then it feels uncomfortable. Then it feels healing. And eventually, it begins to feel sacred. Because solitude becomes the place where you reconnect with yourself. The place where masks fall away. The place where performance ends. The place where your true voice finally becomes audible. Many people spend years searching for belonging, searching for understanding, searching for validation, only to discover that the relationship they were truly missing was the relationship with themselves. Think about that. How much of your life has been spent trying to be understood, trying to be accepted, trying to fit in, trying to explain yourself? Now imagine directing that energy inward. Imagine learning to understand yourself, accept yourself, trust yourself, remain loyal to yourself. That shift changes everything. Because the more deeply connected you become to yourself, the less dependent you become on external approval, the less afraid you become of rejection, the less threatened you become by misunderstanding. And slowly, the thing that once felt like loneliness transforms into something entirely different: freedom. Not freedom from people. Freedom from needing people to confirm who you are. And that freedom is where true awareness begins to mature, because awareness without inner stability creates suffering, but awareness combined with self-knowledge creates wisdom. And wisdom was always the destination, not perception, not insight. Wisdom, the ability to see clearly, without becoming lost in what you see. And that brings us to Jung's most important lesson of all: the reason awareness exists in the first place. The reason some people are called to see beyond appearances. The reason this entire journey began. It was never about understanding the world. It was about returning to the self. If there is one idea that sits at the very heart of Carl Jung's work, it is this: you were never meant to become someone else. You were meant to become yourself. At first, that sounds simple, almost obvious. Of course you should be yourself. Of course you should live authentically. Of course you should follow your own path. But Jung understood something most people never realize. Becoming yourself is one of the hardest tasks in human life. Because before you can become yourself, you must first discover who you are beneath everything you have been taught to be. beneath expectations, beneath conditioning, beneath fear, beneath social roles, beneath the countless identities you have accumulated over the years. And that process is rarely comfortable. Imagine an actor who has played the same character for decades. At first, the role feels natural, then familiar, then permanent, until one day, the actor begins forgetting where the character ends and the real person begins. This is what happens to many people psychologically. They become so identified with their roles that they lose contact with their essence, the responsible one, the successful one, the strong one, the healer, the peacemaker, the achiever, the caretaker, the victim, the rebel, the rescuer. Over time, these identities become prisons, not because they are false, but because they are incomplete. No single role can contain the fullness of who you are, and yet most people spend their lives defending those roles, protecting them, performing them, maintaining them, even when they no longer fit. This is why awareness often feels disruptive, because awareness begins exposing the gap between who you are and who you have been pretending to be. At first, this realization can feel unsettling. You start questioning things, the life you built, the choices you made, the relationships you maintain, the goals you pursue, not because everything is wrong, but because something deeper is asking to emerge, something that has been waiting patiently beneath the surface. Jung called this process individuation, the journey towards psychological wholeness, not perfection, wholeness. And there is an important difference. Perfection is about becoming flawless. Wholeness is about becoming complete. Perfection rejects weakness. Wholeness embraces it. Perfection seeks approval. Wholeness seeks truth. Perfection hides imperfections. Wholeness integrates them. This is why Jung believed the goal of life was not self-improvement in the modern sense. It was self-discovery, the courage to know yourself honestly, the courage to face your shadow, the courage to remove the masks that no longer serve you, the courage to stop living according to other people's expectations. And perhaps this is the real reason awareness appears in certain people's lives. Not to make them superior, not to make them special, but to call them inward, to invite them into a deeper relationship with themselves. Think about how much energy people spend trying to become acceptable, trying to fit in, trying to gain approval, trying to meet expectations, trying to avoid criticism, trying to become what everyone else wants them to be. Now imagine redirecting that energy. Imagine investing that energy into understanding yourself, listening to yourself, trusting yourself, honoring yourself. Suddenly, life begins to change, not externally at first, internally. You become less reactive, less dependent on validation, less afraid of rejection, less controlled by the opinions of others. And this does not happen because the world changes. It happens because your center becomes stronger. You stop searching for yourself in other people's reactions. You stop measuring your worth through external approval. You stop abandoning yourself to maintain belonging. And perhaps for the first time, you begin standing on your own ground. This is the paradox Jung understood so well. The people who see more than others often spend years feeling disconnected. Yet the solution is not finding more people who understand them. The solution is becoming deeply connected to themselves, because once that connection is established, everything changes. Loneliness becomes solitude, confusion becomes clarity, sensitivity becomes wisdom, awareness becomes guidance, and life begins flowing differently, not because challenges disappear, but because you stop fighting yourself. You stop resisting who you are. You stop betraying your own nature. You stop running from your own depth. And that is when awareness reveals its true purpose. Not to burden you, not to isolate you, not to make life harder, but to guide you home. Home to the person you were always meant to become. Home to the self. And once that journey begins, there is no going back. Because after you have tasted authenticity, the masks become too heavy to wear. The illusions become too obvious to maintain. The false versions of yourself become impossible to sustain. And slowly, you begin living from a deeper place, a quieter place, A truer place. A place Jung believed existed within every human being, waiting patiently, waiting beneath the noise, waiting beneath the fear, waiting beneath the performance, waiting for the moment you finally choose yourself. Perhaps the greatest danger was never seeing too much. Perhaps the real danger was forgetting why you were given that awareness in the first place. Carl Jung believed that consciousness is not a destination, it is a calling. A calling to wake up, to see clearly, to live honestly, to become whole. And for those who see what others don't, that calling often arrives earlier. You notice contradictions. You notice hidden truths. You notice emotional realities that others overlook. And for a while, this can feel like a burden, a weight, a loneliness, a curse. But maybe it was never a curse at all. Maybe it was an invitation to stop living on the surface, an invitation to stop chasing approval, an invitation to stop abandoning yourself, an invitation to go deeper. Because the truth is, not everyone is meant to see the world in the same way. Not everyone is meant to walk the same path. Not everyone is meant to ask the same questions. And that is okay. Your journey was never about becoming like everyone else. It was about becoming yourself, the version of you that exists beneath fear, beneath conditioning, beneath expectations, beneath every mask you have ever worn. And perhaps that is what awareness has been trying to teach you all along. Not that the world is broken, not that people are asleep, not that you are different, but that your soul is asking for something deeper, a deeper truth, a deeper relationship with yourself, a deeper way of living. So if you have spent your life feeling misunderstood, if you have spent your life noticing things others ignore, if you have spent your life wondering why you never quite fit in, maybe there is nothing wrong with you. Maybe you are simply seeing the invitation others have not yet noticed, the invitation to return to yourself. And that may be the most important journey of all. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the Kingdom Within and join our growing community of seekers, thinkers, and truth explorers. And tell me in the comments, what truth did you start seeing that changed the way you view life forever? Until next time, keep looking within, because the greatest mystery you will ever discover is the one waiting inside you.